How can you put a price on disaster? The numbers you read are dizzying. But the true costs have still been underestimated. According to a new report from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the 2013 Global Assessment Report puts direct losses from disasters this century at $2.5 trillion. That doesn't include indirect losses from lost wages, closed schools, disrupted lives, poverty, unemployment. And the biennial report warns disaster-prone areas to brace for massive losses to come.
There is good news, which is less people dying. There is also bad news, and the bad news is the economic losses are going through the roof.
We've just got more and more property, people, assets, infrastructure in hazard-prone locations.
We need to redefine how risk is measured and understood in a global economy, and at the same time understand that undermining natural wealth or the natural disasters that do come along is also connected to financial instability.
Richer countries may be able to weather the loss of hundreds of billions of dollars from earthquakes, tsunamis, and cyclones. But for smaller economies, it's something else again. Tourists from cold climates dream of a sunny beach holiday. So developers build beach resorts. Never mind the potential menace from waves and wind. Local governments become dependent on tourist dollars and reluctant to promote risk-sensitive investment.
The economies of a lot of the small island developing states typically depend on tourism income for the value of 40, 60, 80% or more of their exports. So what this means is that a disaster in the tourism industry, it becomes a disaster for the economy as a whole.
Meanwhile, a new wave of urbanization often benefits short-term speculators, but undermines longer-term city resilience, the Global Assessment Report says.
For example, the increase in urban flooding has a lot to do precisely with how we plan cities, not with nature, but against nature.
The studies we've done in this report tend to show that in general, there's still fairly weak incentives for actually getting disaster risk factored into urban development.
And the prevailing agribusiness model is driving disaster risk, especially in Africa, buying up land in a rush for profits from exports and rising food prices.
A lot of this investment is going into areas where the hazard, drought for example, poorly understood, poorly modelled, poorly mapped. So it's very difficult, I think, for these companies to calculate the risks.
The Global Assessment Report says only 28 out of 72 national disaster management platforms have representatives from business lending their influence and expertise. It says governments and future international agreements like the successor to the Hyogo Framework for Action must bring the private sector in from the cold.
Every time something very dramatic happens, you hear people say, oh, we could not have imagined that this would happen. So I would say really the first thing we have to do is to start imagining what can happen, to actually acknowledge that this may happen to me as well.